Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 11th Southern Steelhead Coalition meeting. Thank you for coming out. Let's get started. All right. Welcome to Southern Steelhead Coalition meeting. So today, it's going to be a quick hello and updates. I'm really glad to hear all this Southern Steelhead talk. Let's talk about it more in the open discussion because I have questions too. We'll do some coalition updates. Then we'll have our speaker, Monty Schmitt from the TNC, talk about safeguarding California's Streamflow, how well permitting can protect water for people and nature. Then we'll have a question and answer section for Marty. And then we'll have a small, brief Southern Steelhead Coalition strategic plan update from Mac Huebner, who's in charge of that. Then we'll have coalition-wide project updates. So if you have a project, people want to hear about it. I'll be talking about, I have an ongoing survey from what people want from the coalition. And this was something that was asked for again and again. People want to know about your projects, not just people, but agencies also want to know about this project. They want to know what you're doing. It helps them as regulators to see what's going on in our area. So if you have any, please that, and I'll make it a little bit easier. I'll start with agencies and governments. So if agencies want to say, hey, we've been doing this, and then NGOs, it goes for any nonprofit organizations or just organizations in general. And then finally, upland discussion where we can pick up on our announcements or what people were talking about fish. It's great to hear that there was fish in general. Since we get so little, I think this is the first time I've asked if anybody's seen new fish that we've got such a really deep conversation. Most time it's like, no. So really excited to pick up that conversation. Thanks for everybody showing up. Okay, so real quick for the coalition will be partnering with WSP on some wave events, which I'll be talking about more in future. But those are one-day restoration events that I'll be blasting to you guys. So if you have any volunteers or want to table at it, I'll let you know about that. I am also working on another Southern Steelhead Coalition project field trip. I'm in talks with somebody else on the first project site, but Russell has volunteered. He wants to take everybody to Rose Valley. So when that happens, I'll announce that. So Rose Valley is one of the confirmed project sites, and then hopefully I can nail down the other project site as soon as possible. The Southern Steelhead Coalition will be sending out a newsletter. I forgot to send out one this month. Forgive me. I was out in the field all this week, but this newsletter is to share knowledge and things that are going on in the coalition. So if you have an event you want people to go to, if you want to tell people what you're doing, send it out to me the first week or the last week of the month, and then I will publish it the first Friday of the month. Okay? And I think you've been getting emails from me. The first newsletter I sent out in January was through Outlook, and it did not work. I think 3 people got it, and some people didn't even know about it. So I will be sending a newsletter out. Please check your emails, and then I have also sent you an email, which I'd like you to forward the news to so I don't lose it. And then again, the survey, which I'll be talking about more in depth. This is what you guys want out of the coalition and how you want me to direct it. We got a lot of really cool, interesting suggestions and comments on that. So I'll be talking more about that in the open discussion when I am asking you guys to share things. And again, anybody can join these meetings. Forward it to people who express interest. Just don't forward it to any bad actors that are going to be trying to scream during the meetings or anything like that. So these meetings are for all who are interested in Steelhead. Okay? And then, again, we're looking to expand coalition involvement. What meetings do you think I should be at? Let me know. Email me. You can include oceanic groups, coastal groups, Santa Barbara, Santa Monica. The coalition is much bigger now. So happy to join any meetings that you think the coalition should be at. And then if there's any outreach events that you want the coalition to be at, let me know. And then if you want a table with the coalition, you guys have all a bunch of different organizations. I'm talking to all these nonprofits here. You guys have time, hours that you need to do outreach for. You can do it with me. I'll provide the table. I'll provide the shade structure. I'll provide the chairs. You just show up and sit with me for a bit. Or you give me flyers that I can then talk about. When people ask what other organizations are part of this coalition, if I have a flyer to give out, you can spread the word about your work of your organization. So this could be sent to me by mail, email. You can join me at a outreach event. I put all my outreach events on our calendar and it'll be on the newsletter. So reach out to me if you need outreach hours. Come join me. I'm doing it all the time. Okay, and then finally, our next meeting date will be May 6th. Same time. I cannot believe I edited this like 5 times. It's not going to be to 4. It's going to be 12:30. Sorry about that. It'll be 10 a.m. to 12:30, not 4 p.m. I checked this thing so many times, I think I must have done that. But anyways, feel free to send us in this meeting all invites. Again, this is 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m., not 4 p.m., not a 5-hour symposium. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn this over to Monty. Monty, you can share your screen as soon as I'm done sharing mine. And then Monty will talk about safeguarding California Streamflow.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Elizabeth, for that introduction. And if I can pull this off here, I will get my presentation running. All right. This is always the moment of truth. All right. Do you folks see my opening slide?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Fantastic. So you don't get to see my notes. Okay. So thank you again. Some of you might have heard me talk, I'll say it was like a year ago. I did a kind of a brief overview of some of the work that we were doing. And so this is a little bit of review for those who might not have seen that, and then kind of talk about a lot of things that have happened since then. So again, I'm Monty Schmitt, and I'm a senior project director in the California Nature Conservancy's water program. And I'm going to talk about this work that we've been doing to address groundwater management. And it's really mostly outside of Sigma basins, though the things I'm going to talk about, have an overlap with Sigma as well. But really, as you'll see in my presentation, and I think you folks often are aware how much of the state is not covered by Sigma. And I'm going to explain how we kind of why are we talking about groundwater at a Steelhead meeting, and really highlight, I think, some of the opportunities and the needs for local governments to protect stream flows and address how to manage wells sustainably. And then I'm going to highlight some of the resources and science tools that we've been developing to support local governments and conservation partners like all of you and agencies to understand the situation and to develop permitting frameworks and other things that really are about restoring and protecting the health of our rivers that are so important for our communities and for our fish, and obviously as water supply for communities and for people and for farms. So I want to highlight that this is work that while I'm up here talking today, this is work that is part of the Nature Conservancy's partnership with Trout Unlimited and California Trout as the Salmon and Steelhead Coalition. It's very, very similar. We almost sound so similar that we overlap. And I was at your at the symposium in the fall, and I talked a little bit about our work and about about our coalition, the coalition up north, and we truly have so much overlap in the things that we care about in the northern part of the state. We've been focusing on this nexus of the health of our rivers, and primarily focusing a lot on stream flow as a primary issue of concern, and then this nexus between how we restore stream flow to support the health of our rivers, but obviously how important they are for the health of these communities. And a lot of them in our northern California, in our northern coastal, central coast, northern coastal, are they're not like the Central Valley, where you have large dams and large infrastructure that's moving water around. A lot of communities are sort of, needing to deal with the water budget of what they have within their watersheds, within their jurisdiction. So while I'm going to talk about, a lot of the work that we do, this work as it touches down in the coast, again, I really think that so much of what we're talking about here really does impact the entire state. So, why do groundwater wells matter to fish? As you can imagine, it has to do with the water. But, it really starts with the health of our rivers. And ultimately, we're not dealing with rivers anywhere, in very few instances where, we have undisturbed rivers. Most of our rivers are impacted due to historic land use changes like logging practices or urban development, and loss of streamside vegetation, and, diversions associated with, growing human demand and agricultural water needs, especially in the dry months when demand for water is at its highest, is leaving less and less water in streams for fish, wildlife, and for people. And, California's coastal Mediterranean climate means that both people and fish are struggling to get enough water during the dry season. And that is only getting longer and drier and hotter due to climate change. And so the result, for so many of our coastal rivers and others in the state is that our ecosystems are degraded and they fundamentally don't have the water they need, especially in the summer, to support ecosystem function and fish habitat. And that's a really big issue, as you all are very aware, with for steelhead and more so up north, coho. And it's, because the juveniles spend their, entire first year in their natal streams. And that means they're trying to survive during these long, really hot summers. I mean, they're truly amazing fish that they have adapted, to the strategy of hanging out in these natal streams and making it through, very, very dry seasons for many, many months so that they can grow and survive and then go out, hopefully as big as they can be so that they come back in later years. And but this is also what makes them really vulnerable to the impacts of diversions and extremely dry years that are dewatering streams and increasing temperatures. So, how we came to this work is actually from work that I was doing up in the Navarro River watershed. So that's kind of, if you think of, out near where Mendocino is, it's in Mendocino County, the Navarro, or if you look on a map where Boonville is, that's the Navarro River watershed. And so much of it looks incredibly, when you drive through, you might kind of be like, wow, what's wrong here? Because a lot of it's undeveloped landscape, but it's, 50 years ago, this was like a moonscape in many places because it was so heavily logged. And so it is in a way, it's a watershed coming back, but, there are more people who've been moving into the area. And while there's not really, there still is timber management, but timber harvest is so much different than it was, back in the 1950s and so forth. But there is an increasing, rural community that's been growing there. And there's a lot of wine growing too that has moved into the region. And so about 10 years ago, we, TNC, came to the Navarro because we knew that we wanted to work on this. We knew that this was a critical issue, making sure rivers have enough water to support fish and people. And we knew that the Navarro was a perfect place to go to work because it suffers from all the challenges that really stem up and down our coastal watersheds, where you have land use and you have people who, are diverting from streams to meet their needs. And after a number of years of working there, we actually in the Navarro got familiar enough with the entire watershed where we could add up all the direct diversions in the watershed. And when we added up the direct diversions and we combined that with the existing stream flow, in a way, the two should have added up to, historic unimpaired flows. If you have the existing flows and you have all the water that's being diverted, it should be something close. But actually, in fact, the number was really off and there was a big block of missing water. And that's when it really became clear how much water, that missing water was groundwater. It's the groundwater contributions to stream flow that were missing in the budget. And so, we have this great little graphic that just kind of obviously explains that, in the wet season, rainfall infiltrates into the soil and it recharges groundwater aquifers that slowly feed water to streams. And in rivers, like the Navarro and many others, groundwater is the primary source of almost all stream flow during the dry season. If there's no snowpack melting or there's no releases from a reservoir or whatnot, in July, all that water that's in the ground, that's in the stream was recently groundwater. But we're seeing, declines in groundwater contributions to stream flow for a number of reasons. And the first is that the changes in land use, going from forests and grasslands to road networks and urban development are reducing the amount of infiltration that rainfall can penetrate, infiltrate in and replenish groundwater aquifers. But more recently and increasingly, the problem is due to wells extracting groundwater. And growing populations and increasing water supply demands and recent droughts have led a lot of farms and communities to drill wells in search of more reliable and drought-resilient water supplies. And this has led to unsustainable pumping that has depleted groundwater aquifers and their contributions to stream flow. And this is why in many streams, which historically flowed year-round, now go dry in the summer. And to understand this better in the Navarro, we actually modeled streamflow depletion impacts of wells related to cannabis production and domestic use. And what we found is not only a significant depletion of streamflow, but importantly, the impacts increase with time. And this highlights the need to address the impacts of wells, and truly the sooner the better, because the problem is getting worse. And the scale of wells on the landscape is often hard to notice, but from this image from Sonoma County, it's clear that wells are a significant source of water, especially when you're outside of the municipal service area for a water district. Almost everybody is relying on wells or direct diversions. And the number of wells is growing rapidly. In Sonoma County, it was the 8th most number of irrigated wells installed from 2022 to 2024, and the second most domestic wells in the state. And so the number of wells is growing rapidly, not just in Sonoma, but truly throughout the state. So, we really, I think this is sort of almost like telling people that, that water flows uphill when we say that, groundwater is stream flow. And that rivers are groundwater dependent ecosystems. And then when we're depleting our groundwater, we're depleting our streams. And we can't restore our rivers without addressing the proliferation of new wells. Because while we can build projects that restore stream flow, and we can build infiltration projects that help put more water in the ground, the challenge remains that new wells are being installed all the time, potentially negating these very costly flow restoration efforts and truly actually worsening the crisis that everybody's got to try to solve for stream flow for fish, as well as groundwater sustainability. So that gets to the question of what is groundwater management in California? And really, California, has largely treated groundwater and surface water as legally distinct. Unlike surface water diversions, which I'm sure many of you know, they're regulated by the state to avoid harm to existing users and ensure that should, in theory, have flows needed for nature. But county governments, readily permit new groundwater wells without considering these impacts. But things began to change about 12 years ago when during a previous drought, when thousands of new wells were being drilled in the Central Valley and farmers' wells were failing. And that created the enabling conditions for the state to pass the 2014 Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. But, SGMA does not require the restoration of groundwater basins to provide stream flow. It just requires limits on pumping to avoid additional declines from a 2014 baseline, which in essence locks in the depleted groundwater conditions of that time. And while SGMA seems to address a segment part of the state, it's important to note where it doesn't, because large portions of the state, over 60%, are not addressed by SGMA. And when you focus on the watersheds, as we are doing, where we know there's a high priority for salmon or freshwater biodiversity, SGMA basins do not address most of these areas. And many of these watersheds are home to rivers that do not have the water they need to support fish. And so this is why this is an issue that is so important to us. So where SGMA led to the first regional efforts to sustainably manage groundwater extraction, a recent court decision has basically established new requirements for counties to manage groundwater with consideration of impacts to fish and wildlife. And this is the 2018 Scott River decision, which basically established the requirement that all counties in the state must ensure their permitting of new wells is done in a way that is protective of public trust resources that include stream flow needed for fish. And shortly after this ruling, Sonoma County was sued over the impacts of their well ordinance has had on depleting stream flows in the Russian River watershed that are needed to support listed coho and steelhead. And this prompted them to update their well ordinance, which they did in 2023. Santa Cruz County also initiated a process to update their well ordinance in response to the new requirement, and they completed it successfully in 2025. As a result of updating these well ordinances, just to give you a sense of the scale of impact that this could have on our rivers that we care about for fish, this led to over 770 miles of rivers having increased stream flow protections from the impacts of new wells. 770 miles just in those two counties alone. And so that gives you a sense of the scale of the impact that we see that this new requirement could have on the health of our rivers and salmon runs, not only in our coastal watersheds, but this is a requirement that is required of all counties in the state. So, however, we participated, the Salmon and Steelhead Coalition, we participated in both policy and technical advisory groups for both county efforts. And I'll be honest in saying these efforts were really not easy. And, I think both really were trying to do the best they could, but absent any clear guidance from the state, counties have been on their own to figure out how to assess the impacts of wells and protect stream flow, fish, and other public trust resources. And to address this challenge, this is where we're trying to step forward, especially given the importance of this work for our fish and our rivers, and also for water supply security for farms and communities. We developed a guidance report this last fall based on the experience of working with these counties. And the report provides principles and guidelines to help counties in partnership with folks like all of you, local stakeholders to help undertake a process that's transparent but informed to assess the risk of new wells and develop protective well permitting frameworks. So, for a few moments here, I'm going to briefly describe the outline of these processes, and at the end, there's a URL, and I think all of you might have gotten. Elizabeth might have sent around. We sent out an email that had an update about all this, and so you could read about it all in greater detail, or you can obviously reach out to me. So, just to quickly go through this process, because this is, spend a fair amount of time here, but for the sake of covering other things, I'll just kind of touch on this, and we can talk more later if you'd like. So the first most important step, obviously, for a county is to identify, public trust resources within their permitting jurisdiction where stream flow and groundwater dependent wildlife or ecosystems are at risk of negative impacts from additional well pumping. And while this, I'm trying to focus on the impacts of stream flow to listed salmon and steelhead, local governments might identify other public trust resources they want to address, including other groundwater dependent ecosystems or species, or public trust issues such as fishing, recreation, and navigation. These are all public trust resources that could fall into consideration. So an important first step. A key next step, though, is to identify the protective stream flow thresholds that preserve ecological function. And the goal here is to identify thresholds that, if they're not met, would be expected to cause adverse impacts to the previously identified public trust resources, Steelhead, Co. And if available, local studies and data sets will be some of the best information if counties have those things. If they've got minimum in-stream flow recommendations that exist for local watersheds or site-specific studies, that's fantastic. But many streams and rivers don't have that kind of information. And so we provide a number of different resources that counties can go to, we have the Natural Flows database, and there's what's called the California Environmental Flows Framework, that are these tools that can provide at a click, frankly, an estimate of the amount of water that is needed in stream to support ecological function. These are modeled predictions that are specific to watersheds in different geographies of the state. They're not a detailed, flow, PHAB sim, flow habitat relationship, but these literally would take 5 minutes to go and find out an estimate of what a stream's reach might need. And that's a lot cheaper, faster than a site-specific study. So once you've identified where your public trust resources are and the thresholds that support ecological function, the next key thing is to determine if current stream flows meet those thresholds in all year types, but particularly in dry years, because those are some of the most vulnerable where systems are really at stress. So we're pointing folks to different resources for existing Streamflow. If you've got a USGS gauge or some other gauge maintained by a local government, that's fantastic. We have some different resources that can help point people toward where they can find gauge data. I'm sure all of you know how to do that. But it's really important to understand the existing stream flows in the context of existing water rights as well, for both surface water and groundwater, because a significant portion of a stream's flow may already be allocated or being used such that additional wells could undermine the reliability of the water supplies for existing users. So if you think about that, whatever stream flow is out there in a stream segment of interest, there are existing, appropriative rights such that somebody could exercise some or all or more than they have been of their existing water rights. So when you're asking, is there more space in the stream flow to sustain an additional diversion related to a well, you have to understand, obviously what your existing stream flows are, and county governments should be thinking about, how much of that stream flow is already allocated. And this is exactly the process, frankly, that if somebody wants to go and put in a new direct diversion and seek a new appropriative right, this is an analysis they would have to do as well. So it just makes sense that we're now essentially saying you have to consider this. Though groundwater rights and appropriative rights are complex, and there's some sense that well water associated with your property is kind of akin to a riparian right, such that your ability to take well water might be superior to appropriative rights. That's a gray area still, I think, in the legal sense, but you can see the tension that's already beginning to occur there, and probably is going to be a source of conflict in the future. And if counties can help avoid that by doing some management now, they will be saving everybody a lot of headaches. Okay, so the fourth step is where we begin to shift from an identification phase in our approach to the evaluation phase. And this is the step that entails the process of taking all that data that's been collected in steps 1 through 3 and pairing it with model scenarios of future development and well permitting considerations. And in doing this, step 4 allows you to develop a groundwater availability map, in essence, and additional decision-making resources, which will increase the ability of county agencies or other decision makers or resource managers to understand stream flow depletion risk associated with future well development. And so we recommend that stream flow depletion impacts modeling, is done through what we call a unified modeling approach. And it takes understanding that, counties deal with a very large geography, and the modeling tools that exist can vary from very basic analytical modeling tools I'll talk about in a second, all the way up to the things that we might have heard about that are these detailed numerical models they're very expensive and to develop. They take a lot of time to develop, and you need a lot of data for them to work in a robust manner. But they're too expensive and time consuming to build for an entire county. And so we talk about a unified modeling approach as an approach of using low tech, cheaper, faster to develop analytical modeling tools, and pairing that with numerical models where if you need a higher level of resolution, where there's a higher risk of new wells to a stream, or where you have particularly sensitive fish habitat or other public trust resources, you might need a numerical model in proximity to those resources. But you could use an analytical modeling tool to look at your whole geography and do more course assessment. And through a unified approach of modeling, you can cover your whole geography, have an answer and a sense of risk, and you've built things at a scale that is cost effective and efficient. So, I'm not a groundwater modeler, but I'm really thankful to have project partners both inside of TNC and within the groundwater science community, who together we've been developing analytical modeling approaches to support regional groundwater planning and management. If you want to know more about that, again, please feel free to email and reach out. But the approach of creating a unified approach here is what we think will allow counties to be able to answer the question of risk and to do planning on into the future. So then the final step here is to actually consider and develop a revised well ordinance is really the goal that the counties have. But also to not only update their well ordinance, but also build in tools that will help them to do permitting into the future, because that's what counties have to do. And it's probably one of the things that counties are most concerned about is how will they address permits that come at them in the future in the context of an updated well ordinance. So the process here results in a variety of different tools and information that counties or resource managers can use going forward. And it provides maps of public trust resources, the development of ecologically protected stream flow thresholds, and provides information regarding real world state of existing stream flows and existing groundwater use and risks of depletion. And by bringing that information together, sets up a framework to assess future permits and achieves sustainability goals that a county would start out with. What are their objectives? Do they want to protect their public trust resources, restore them, whatever they are? A tool like this will help the county to achieve whatever they step out to do. So, I want to just quickly wrap up here by talking about the reasons why a county should undertake updating their well ordinance, not just because it's required, but because it is good for the communities they serve. And I think that that's a really important point here, is that I think everybody wants to do what is inspiring them for the benefit and for the good versus you must do this. And, by the litigation that happened with the Scott River decision and so forth, this seems like a real requirement that the counties must do. But this is really an opportunity for counties to really develop wells in a sustainable manner and to really think long-term how to protect the health of their streams, but also, the existing water uses that, water rights that are out there. Sustainably managing groundwater resources, ensures that the groundwater resources will be there in future droughts to meet the needs of communities. And groundwater is the primary source of drinking water for a lot of communities, and contributes up to 60% of the state's water supply in dry years. And updating well ordinances can help prevent those conflicts between the water users and promotes maybe a more fair use of resources by ensuring that new wells don't impact stream flow or groundwater wells that are already being, those wells that are already being used to meet residential and farm needs and others. Obviously having healthy rivers, benefits local residents, and communities through public health and recreational opportunities. And, restored creeks, they foster a sense of civic pride and stewardship. And, and we increasingly recognize in our highly digital world how important nature is for the health and well-being of individuals and our communities. Developing a well ordinance that is protected will also help identify mitigation measures, because there are things that we can do to increase the amount of water that's being infiltrated. And that can have other benefits of, reducing non-point source pollution by increasing, infiltration of stormwater runoff, for example. And fundamentally, updating well ordinances are going to be addressing some of the gaps that exist within the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. Like I said, SIGMA doesn't require the restoration of groundwater resources to restore stream flow. It just halts the decline. And so that doesn't really actually perhaps address all the goals and desires that a county or communities want to see with their groundwater and their contributions to stream flow. So I'm going to end here by saying, one of the most important things is that counties need support from people. This is a challenging process, and there are no standardized guidelines. And so for counties to update their well ordinances and to do this successfully is going to really require support from conservation groups and landowners, agricultural interests, well drillers who have tons of information about groundwater and well conditions, and other resource management agencies, because it's really going to, we've seen that it really does take, transparent and constructive and cooperative engagement in order from all the interests to be able to develop something that is well understood and it's informed and it's therefore broadly, hopefully supportable. Counties are challenged to come up with not only a process to update well ordinances, because there are no guidelines. And so really one of the things that we hope will come along and we're going to try to work to have happen is to talk with the various state agencies who have a responsibility to help manage groundwater and stream flow and water supply to develop statewide guidelines so that counties know what it is that they need to do, the issues they need to address, and then hopefully also provide some resources, because it is probably really inefficient, frankly, to have every single county develop groundwater modeling tools. Each one might be different. The approaches will be different. Can you compare the results? And counties will abut right next to each other, and so groundwater does move. And so we think that ultimately, there are technical resources that the state down the line would be a service to all counties to have the state step forward and help develop some tools that could be used broadly. And I want to really highlight this important need for technical resources, and the development of groundwater modeling tools. And this is something that we are really spending a lot of time working on, because you can't see groundwater. The only way that you can really understand what's happening with groundwater is through models. And that's challenging. The models that exist today have limitations, and we understand that. And some of the things, the unified approach is our thought strategy for how to address this. I'm really excited to say that there's a lot of really exciting work going on in this field, both with some of the state agencies, and the counties. Like Santa Cruz County has done some really interesting work. Sonoma County too. We're also excited by the opportunity TNC has had to use some of our properties as a place to learn. And for example, the Dangerman Preserve has a very unique network of groundwater wells that we're excited to use to help understand groundwater and infiltration and stream flow dynamics that can help make models that really track this relationship between groundwater infiltration, pumping, and stream flow, and help develop models that are that have a benefit across the entire state. And the last thing, is that the counties are going to need funding. This is a process that does take time and resources. And so we're recognizing that if we want to see this to be successful as we do, we're going to be needing to advocate that counties have the funding and technical resources they need in order to pull this off. And with that concludes my presentation. There's my email address. There's a website address where you can go and see a lot of the things that I just spoke about with much prettier pictures. And then there's also a report there that you can download if you want to read that. And with that, I'll be happy to take questions, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Real quick. So we will have a question and answer period, but I would like to, if you could stop sharing, Monty, that'd be great.
You bet.
Great presentation. Okay. So real quick, 2 announcements that I'd like to make. I saw that Laura pointed out that this meeting is going till 12:30. This meeting is not going to 12:30. I don't know what happened. It's only till 12 o'clock. So if you're planning to be here at 12:30, you can get half an hour of your life back. We're only going to be here till 12. It's an hour and a half meeting only. So just want to make that clear. Also, I see we do have some questions in chat. Can you also, everybody, because we need to record the attendance for this, please put your name and affiliation in the chat for all attendees. So when you have time, please go ahead and type your name and affiliation in. Would really appreciate that. And so first question, Abigail, would you like me to read your question out? I assume so. It seems like the conservation interests would be in conflict with agricultural interests. How do you get them in agreement, Monty?
Great, a great question, and I would say honestly that they are not in conflict, and actually I would say that there's a lot of synergistic and mutual benefits of this. So for a lot of agricultural interests, the well ordinances are just about how you go forward. They're not retroactive. I mean, if counties want to do something to do groundwater management, retroactively, that's a different question. But, right now, for all, both agricultural as well as, rural residents, who have wells, or if they take water directly from a stream, they should be really concerned about, unmanaged addition of new wells, because it's chipping away at their water security. Every new well that goes in is taking some quantity of water. If you have a direct diversion, that's taking water out. And in the summertime, a lot of appropriative rights have minimum flow bypass requirements. So if additional wells are always kind of chipping the water level down, eventually that water will have a less frequent time that it is above their flow thresholds, and hence the amount of water and the season of water that they can take water will be diminishing. And obviously, if you have wells and you have more wells going in, if you're depleting groundwater down, you can end up dewatering somebody else's well.
Great. And then Abigail has another question too. And then if you guys have a question, please raise your hand in chat, or raise your hand on Zoom or type your question in chat. Also, does the county-wide model ordinance have language about the long-term impacts of groundwater depletion and the potential need to move water from one basin to another basin to address human needs or growth, or is that not an issue?
I mean, it's definitely an issue, and to varying degrees depending on the county. I think that it's up to the county to use this information. If they genuinely want to address this issue, they need to give thought to how additional wells are exacerbating these problems, or impacting these management issues, and how they want to address them. Probably the greatest concern that I have now is that there's just no understanding of what's happening in the ground, unless you're in a Sigma basin, or you're in an alluvial area where there's a lot of monitoring wells, but that's a really small fraction of the geography out there. And so, it's really, to the tune in California writ large, there are like, I think over like 7 million, people in California who rely on fractured bedrock groundwater for their water supply. And fundamentally, there's just no sustainable management of that under the current requirements.
Okay. I see we have Abigail with another question, but I'm going to let Candace go first. So Candace, go ahead.
I was actually, if Abigail is following up, we'll rather let her close the loop. Yeah.
Great. Abigail, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I was just curious, that question really came about because, in the county, we have a number of cities that we don't have jurisdiction over. And for example, we heard that Simi Valley is entertaining like a data center, which obviously is going to have a huge impact on different resources. And so that's kind of where it was coming from. So
great.
Thanks.
Thank you for that, Abigail. So I should have said earlier on, cities have this same requirement. Basically that, it is I'm not an attorney, but the Scott River decision basically says that any government entity that is permitting wells is basically, as an extension of California government, is permitting water use, and therefore has this obligation to consider public trust resources. So where you have cities, that are neighboring counties or are within counties, there is a requirement, in essence, I think, for them also to address this. And I can only imagine that it would be very wise where you have interconnected basins to have to have coordinated management and planning.
Okay, I'm sorry, and I'll be quick, but just a clarification. This agreement is for all the basins or just the ground management agencies? Sort of the ruling.
The ruling applied to, so the Scott River decision was against involved the Siskiyou County. And so, I know that there are Sigma basins in Siskiyou County, and they are, so Sigma has its own goals, objectives, and responsibilities. And the counties in this instance that I'm talking about are obviously related, but they're different. And there's a different protective threshold and different considerations. So I'm not sure if that's answering your question, but
it did. Thank you.
Yeah. But in other words, it's worth saying, and this came up in both, particularly in Sonoma County, they're like, well, we don't need to consider, the impact of new wells in the Sigma basins because that's covered by Sigma. And this was a primary question that got chewed on by policy and technical groups. And the outcome of that was that no, because Sigma does not set protection management objectives based on protecting public trust resources.
It should.
It does. Well, good point, Candace. And there are people who are, and we have folks within TNC who are working a lot on Sigma and the interconnected surface water issue. There are folks who have very strong opinions that objective is embedded in those requirements, and I know that that's one that's shared by a lot, but. But in terms of the legal decisions that have come out so far, that one maybe hasn't been resolved in any way that's clear yet.
But Abby, I would just add that the decision for Scott was that the county, being a well permitting agency like issuer, has a public trust responsibility. And so it's the cities and the counties also have that responsibility. So like Sigma is actually irrespective. Like if you have endangered species, the cumulative permitting shouldn't impact those resources within their jurisdiction, be it the city or the county.
Great. Thanks. Nice to see you, Candace.
Hi.
Okay, go ahead, Candace.
Yeah. So Monty, when you said there needs to be state guidelines, are you referring to State Water Resource Control Board, DWR, or the regional boards? Where are you envisaging this guidance is going to come from, considering there's the surface water, groundwater interplay?
Yeah. Okay. So, starting at the first part, which is statewide guidelines. This is because it's something that affects, I think, are we 52 counties in the state of California? Like, a lot of counties that are, probably all or some or most are aware of this issue, and the lack of any guidelines and guidance is troubling, and you don't want every county to invent their own wheel, super inefficient, and it won't probably be sufficient to be protected. It could lead to a lot of, disagreements. So that's the reason and need for it. And then, what agencies would have a hand in it? Right now, there is actually a well ordinance update process that is near completion that DWR is leading, but it is a well ordinance. It's a well ordinance guidance, and it's basically almost all about water quality impacts to wells. And I spoke with, I can't remember the woman's name who's leading the process for DWR. They were already 5 years in. I think the whole thing has taken I think they're already 7 or 8 years into their process. And, it's mostly about how you deal with dry wells and wells in proximity to, septic systems, things that you just, that are mostly about human health and safety and water quality. And I asked them if they had if they would consider this, and they were like, it's not part of our mandate. of this body of work.
Mhm.
And so, and she was, and she said that it had been coming up in their working groups, but that their sense is that it doesn't fit there. So anyway, going to who, I truly think that that because you're talking about, I mean, I think DWR and the State Water Resources Control Board and CDFW would all have roles and responsibilities and input, and interest in something like this. So I'm not sure exactly which agency would be in the lead, or not. But I think those three agencies, probably among others, maybe would have input and expertise that would be important in getting it right.
So I know I've mentioned this before, but in San Diego and more recently in Los Angeles counties, the regional boards are including biological criteria in their triennial basin updates. And that kind of sets the in-stream flow requirements on a reach-by-reach basis for biological criteria in those basins. And Coastal Ranch Conservancy has approached a couple of assembly members. And right now, Assembly Member Hart is actually still asking questions, but the bill deadline's in 9 days. So I don't know if it's going to run this year, but that would make the regional boards look at like biological criteria from a water quality perspective. And then it's set at the state level. And then essentially cities and counties would have to not undermine those in-stream flow public trust thresholds, which is kind of getting at the public trust threshold that sustainable management criteria doesn't get at with.
It's
I'm just wondering to what degree CDFW would be engaged in that process. Would it just have an interagency coordination?
Well, if you're talking about a regional board process, I'm not as familiar with it for sure compared to you. So I'm not sure what role CDFW would play. But maybe what I would say, at a higher level, in-stream, criteria to protect in-stream flow values, public trust resources, or water quality. This is kind of like the holy grail of water management, in many ways, because we're, the ambiguity of knowing how much water needs to be left in a stream makes it almost impossible, or I'd say impossible, to manage sustainably. So whether you're talking about how to deal with drought and extreme low flows, and the water board, in other places where they've done curtailments and they're like, okay, there's not enough to meet all the demands that people have. And so they start curtailing. Well, curtailing is one management outcome. I'd like to think that if we plan ahead, we wouldn't have to do that. But, without flow criteria, doing that is very, very hard. And I think you're bringing up the regional board's nexus with this very same question about stream flow criteria. I'm obviously raising it here as well. And so I think this is, and this is another issue that many folks, including, our Salmon and Steelhead Coalition, are working on very hard right now, because we think that without really getting some clarity about flow criteria and then how those are promulgated into standards, has got to be gotten at, because it's really an Achilles heel to good management.
Okay. I think that was a wonderful set of questions. I think I'm going to save the rest of this. Anybody has more questions, we can do that in the open discussion. Monty, I want to say thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, I'm happy, but please, you've got how to contact me, and you've got the links, and thank you for giving me the chance to talk with all of you. Great to see some of you. I recognize some of the names and faces from the symposium, so it's great to connect with all of you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so let's move on to the rest of this. Okay. And again, if you guys have more questions for Monty, please stick around for open discussion. Monty will stick around for that. Okay. I'm just moving everything over. Okay. So again, that was our question and answer period. Next, would like to welcome Matt Keebner, who's in charge of our strategic planning updates. He's going to go over what's new, what's next, what's kind of going on. It's just a brief little update of our strategic planning effort. Mac, are you here?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Hey, everybody. This will be really short. I wanted to just give a quick follow-up. We talked about, I'm going to share here in a second. Okay, so just a quick update. So we talked about at the symposium, we talked about the upcoming strategic planning exercise. So the efforts looking at the Southern Steelhead Coalition 5-year strategic plan covering 2028 through 2032. And we've done a lot of behind the scenes work from the symposium until now. And I just wanted to bring you up to speed where we are, and then kind of set the stage for what the next couple of weeks and months will look like, because there will be some outreach to all of you to solicit some feedback. So here's the overall timeline. We are in the front end of the drafting phase of the work right now. And so there's a small group, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We've formed a strategic planning committee, and I'll share that list with you in a moment so you know who they are. And we're right in the middle of producing the first working draft of what may end up becoming a strategic plan for this coalition. And once we get that first working draft in this group, we'll start to be reaching out to folks to ask for input, feedback, help fill in the gaps, impressions, etc. What we're doing is we're marching toward a November 1st deadline for having a working draft. That there's some grant funding that's supporting this effort. So November 1st is our deadline for a draft that's reviewable by the grant organizations. And so between now and then, there's going to be a lot of work of putting content on page, refining the content, editing the content, making it pretty. Let's make sure we get input from the coalition members so that by then we've got something to work with. After November, we'll work on making it pretty, wordsmithing, pictures, etc. So we're right on the front end of that now. The strategic planning committee is this group of people right here. So number one, thank you. If your name's on the list, thank you for volunteering some time to help us produce the initial drafts of this. The role of this committee is a temporary committee. We're going to work together to get us from where we are now to that November, and then ultimately a final strategic plan. So one, this group's helping put pen to paper to create a draft that we can edit. And then two, this group's going to help, along with me and Elizabeth and Steve Johnson, who's not on, serve as ambassadors of the planning process. And so expect to hear from one or more of us over the course of the next weeks and months, asking for input or feedback, or, hey, did we get this right? Are we missing something? Similarly, if you have questions about where we're at, or you haven't seen anything, or you think of something that you say you don't want the strategic plan for those next 5 years to miss, reach out to one of us. Elizabeth is always a great hub, but there's a lot of you in the coalition, and so this group of names here is helping kind of force multiply Elizabeth's and my ability to talk to everybody, so nobody's surprised in November about what we're seeing as a draft, and that everybody has a chance to provide some input. That's what I have for the update right now. I wanted to put it out there. We're moving. We'll start to be a little bit more visible in terms of what's going on with these drafts, and over the next couple of weeks and maybe even a month and a half here, expect somebody to reach out to you and say, here's where we're at. What do you think? Elizabeth, did I miss anything?
No, I think that's great. Please remember that these people are the ambassadors, right? They are the gatherers of knowledge. So if they email you to ask your opinion, it's because they want to make sure that they get everyone's opinion, especially in the field that they are specializing in. These people are the ambassadors. And if you're like, well, this is the group that that's going to make everything. No, everybody in the coalition has a chance to have input on the plan. but these are your ambassadors. These are the people that you can talk to. If you don't have, a lot of people didn't have time to be on the strategic planning committee. Well, if you know my email, Russell's email, Alex Dixon, Cosmolly, Steve Johnson, Laura, you know them. You're like, hey, can you make sure that this plan states something about this? And these are your ambassadors, the knowledge gatherers who are going to bring stuff to the table to make sure that your voice is heard.
Yep. And a number of you reached out already. So Connor Everts, I know you've reached out. I'll be reaching out to you directly. I know you've done this a bunch of times. And so if you've already reached out, I'll just expect a follow-up. Laura, you've done this a couple of times. Anything to add to this before we hand it off to the next agenda?
No, I think that's great. I would just echo what Elizabeth said, that we're here to help bring in all the information from all the voices. So I know a lot of folks that are in the coalition, and feel free to reach out to me or any of us directly if you have concerns or thoughts, or gee, please make sure this gets in there. So that I would just echo that.
Perfect.
Well said.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Back to you, Elizabeth.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, so we had a really good Steelhead chat before we started recording. So if you're like, wow, we're really short for time, it's because we were talking Steelhead as the Southern Steelhead Coalition does. Am I right, guys? So next I was going to have project-wide updates, but we have about 15 minutes left. So I'm going to once again condense the project updates and the open discussion. So if we had extra time, I was going to wait for agencies and governments. But if you have a project update and you would like to talk about it, and you're from the agency or a government group, and you're like, we're the city and we're doing this right now, blah, blah, blah. You want to tell us about it? Tell us about it. We at the coalition want to know what you guys are doing. It is important that we understand what people are doing so we don't double our efforts, and also so we can support each other. Maybe somebody will want to come in on that and support you. This is also for not NGOs. Any sort of organization that's here wants to talk about what they're doing, go ahead. And again, like I said, I'm going to just condense this here because we only have 15 minutes left. If you want to make an announcement of public engagement events, things you want me to send to the coalition, give me the links, send me an email, what you want me to send out to the coalition after talk about it. But then open discussion. I'm also looking for a speaker for our next meeting. And then also if you want something to be touched on in the next meeting, let me know. If you need something to help with, also voice that opinion. And again, next meeting is May 6th, 10:30 to 12 p.m. So we don't go over your lunch. Okay, sorry that was like a drill, but I think it's important you guys be able to hold the floor. So I'll stop sharing. And I see we already got some hands up. Okay, Mark, you're first. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to let everybody know what the Santa Barbara Fly Fishers Save Santa Barbara Steelhead campaign process is doing. We've narrowed down to work on Mission Creek here in Santa Barbara, and I know there's a lot of work going on with Maria Ignacio Creek and with South Coast Restoration Group. But we've decided to narrow in on Mission Creek, and we're essentially lined out 6 different projects that need to be done within Mission Creek, 3 of which are permanent barriers, and we are focusing on working to get those barriers fixed. We've met with the county, we've met with the city streams, we are working to meet with the Native Plant Society here in town, and also working with local community leaders. So our goal is to open up Mission Creek from the ocean to the headwaters where adequate spawning and rearing habitat is located. So that's our goal for the next several years, I'm sure. But we're engaging everybody we can. And the good news is that the city has 2 projects that are on our list that are to be done. There's bids out. There's a bid request out for design to remove the barriers in a couple of locations. And we're also working with as many people as we can to get the word out about Mission Creek and develop a process over the next 5 years. We hope to open up all the way to good water upstream. So just to let you know, we've got a big event coming on March 31st. I'll send Elizabeth some information on that. It'll be at the Libero Theater. in the afternoon, evening of March 31st. So I'll set it up.
Maybe we'll also table there too, Mark. I'll talk to you about that later. All right, I see a lot of hands up. Dylan, please.
Hey everyone, this is Dylan Wilder. I'm with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So technically an agency update, but I represent the Partners for Fish and Wildlife program, which some of you may have heard of. I think I've talked to several of you one-on-one or done projects in the past. But yeah, the Partners program's non-regulatory. It's a program that offers free technical and financial assistance for habitat restoration projects. And basically, I represent the Central Coast, really from Santa Cruz County down to Santa Barbara County. And how the Partners program works is we offer some funding through a cost share and a cooperative agreement. And we work directly with a variety of partners to like plan the project, implement it, do construction monitoring or biological surveying, monitoring afterwards. We help with federal permits, things like that. So we're kind of like almost a one-stop shop. But the types of projects we do, we want to improve habitat, obviously for a variety of native wildlife, but our focus is federal trust species. And so steelhead, coho, Pacific lamprey, those sorts of anadromous species are definitely a focus in my area. And so I'm just doing my spiel to offer my program services to any of you. Feel free to reach out to me. Like I mentioned, those fish are our priority and the streams are our priority habitat as well in the area. Really, any project idea you have, as long as it's not on federal or state land, is pretty fair game. If you all want to chat with me about that, except that project ideas year round, so don't worry about it being a bad time. And just an example of the types of projects we do, I've taken the Erosion and Sediment Control Field School with the Salmon Restoration Federation, and I'm taking the Fish Pass Design one later this month. So I'm going to have a little bit of that skill set that applies to that type of work. But other things we can do, we can control invasive plants. We can put in like native riparian vegetation on the riparian corridor. We can do like off-stream water sources for livestock, exclusion fencing to benefit a riparian area, low-tech process-based restoration techniques, all sorts of things. So feel free to reach out to me with any questions. I can either put my email in the chat or... Please do. And then can you put a link to this project so people can read more over the guidelines and the restrictions? So I have a flyer. I can send it. Yeah, I can send that to you to share. Our website is at a national level for the Partners program, so it's very vague information, and we're really tailored to the regions that we work in. So, like anywhere in the Central Coast, like I'm your direct contact. You don't have to worry about it being someone from like Washington D.C. or something. So yeah, I can share that info, and yeah, feel free to reach out. Thanks. Great. I'll get that for you. Okay. If you guys have questions, let me just move on to that and then we'll go back to that. Garrett, go ahead.
Cool. Thanks, Elizabeth. I just want to ask these previous speakers tons of questions now, but I'll hold off. I just appreciated Monty's presentation tremendously, though. I think taking that holistic approach to watershed depletion and understanding that just tapping new wells is not the solution. I just wanted to share a little bit of work that Epic is doing with some partners, primarily with TNC right now. We've been really working to develop more holistic irrigation diversions. We're finding that diversions in particular present tremendous barriers for migratory fish, and looking at how we can achieve the sediment and conveyance deliverables of diversion, but while concurrently developing habitat and more nature-based approaches to diversion designs. If folks are interested in that, feel free to reach out. But a lot of that work's ongoing in New Mexico at the moment and working with some tribes, but not that we need to be geographically limited to that. There's also a lot of national dam and barrier removal coalitions going on in addition to working with the California Fish Passage Forum on continuing to inventory new barriers. So as those come up in your studies, everything from Mission Creek to any other obsolete streams that you guys are coming across, if you're interested in including those barriers in the inventory, would be happy to feed those into the pipeline as well. And then lastly, just the focus on restoration and taking advantage of opportunities like Dylan just presented there. I think those are key sources of funding and to restoring the habitat that we need for these fish to replenish themselves. And that's all I have right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Garrett. Also, if we have a little bit of time, go ahead and ask any questions. Candace, though, has a lot of really cool announcements that I want to give her the floor to.
Hi, Ron. So we have the general plan update coming up on Thursday evening for El Cap, Refugio, and Gaviota State Parks, something that Coastal Ranches Conservancy has been advocating through that general plan process is to have the entrance road to the park realigned out of the floodplain. It routinely floods, and currently there's a debris jam at the low flow bridge there that's violating Fish and Game Code 5948. So there isn't passage right now, even though it's open at the estuary. I believe Parks and CDFW are working on a resolution there. Another component of the general plan update is also relocating the campground out of the distributary at the mouth of the creek in the estuary. And then essentially part of our settlement with Parks is also to enhance in-stream habitat within the estuary for tidewater gobies and southern steelhead. So it's an opportunity for folks to engage on Thursday in person, but there's also a March 4th meeting that's going to be via Zoom. So if you can't make the in-person on Thursday, there's a virtual opportunity thereafter. As part of our settlement with Parks, the technical advisory group is reconvening after all the public input from the TAG members, the public. Parks will be presenting a new revised project scope on the 23rd and getting input again from the TAG members. And then Coastal Ranches and Parks are going to be meeting in a more technical meeting with our technical experts. Ethan Bell from Stillwater Sciences and Matt Sticker from Sticker Ecological will be joining me in that meeting. But essentially, we're hoping we'll be able to resolve the fact that today, currently, the updated restoration plan isn't really meeting the settlement terms to consider the steelhead and proper excavation within the estuary. I've also included in the chat the link to the details for the general plan update meeting. I will be providing an update on the TAG meetings at our Gaviota Coast Biodiversity Collaborative meeting on March 16th. But I've also included in the chat another link, which is a survey. Currently, Althouse and Mead is supporting the Union Pacific Railroad. And there's a survey that's going to be open till about mid-April. And that's to get input from folks about how they use the St. Inez River estuary currently to inform that process. Essentially, the Union Pacific Railroad bridge needs to be widened at the mouth of the estuary. And then if you are familiar, Coastal Ranches Conservancy also has a complementary proposal pending that will address the other components. So there's a right-of-way with Union Pacific that goes through a different permitting process to the rest of Vandenberg Space Force Base. And we've partnered there with CBEC or Verdantis. Now they've been purchased. CBEC was purchased by Verdantis, and we're partnering Laura and then Dr. Lisa Stratton from the Cheadle Center also supporting that grant. Right now we're waiting on a support letter from Vandenberg, and we're aiming for the 13th to get that in. And that's the update for Sadie Dares. There's also, we have a petition with the state board with regards to the flow diversions from Gaviota Creek. Currently, Parks diverts flow from Gaviota Creek to service some state parks buildings and the Caltrans rest stop. along Gaviota Creek. And there is currently a report of investigation that has been finalized by the state board, and it's going through their legal counsel. But we're anticipating a decision with regards to that within the next 2 to 4 weeks. Our Caltrans litigation with regards to Endangered Species Act takeoff southern steelhead in Gaviota Creek is still pending. We've actually just passed the 90 days, which is the general time frame that federal courts are given. So we are just waiting on the court right now, the judge to make a decision. And as soon as we have an update there, we'll share that out with the group as well.
Okay, thank you, Candace. I think you need some stuff from me, so I will email you today to get more information on that. We have a couple of different people wanting to talk to you real quick. Laura, how quick is your thing, or should we wrap up Candace's conversation?
Mine's short.
Okay.
So your choice.
Candace, do you want to wrap up this conversation in here real quick? Says Garrett says you're probably aware that state parks have recently mitigated low water crossing at Leo Carrillo State Park that may be worth referencing for the design or construction services. And then Sophie had something else with the survey link. Anything else that you wanted to touch on that before?
Yeah, I don't. With regards to the low flow crossing at Leo Carrillo, I don't think the idea is to keep the crossing at its current location, because it's also impacting sediment flow. We are certainly advocating for a realignment, and it will be interesting to see what Parks comes back to the technical advisory group about. But I think it's actually relocating a bridge to another location within the park for the entrance road.
Nice. So having a span over the creek, ideally.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks.
Okay. Sorry we're so low on time, but go ahead, Laura. I know you have to leave.
So, good morning, everybody. I just wanted to give an update on some passage projects we're working on. I think probably most folks are aware that in 2023 and 2024, we removed 2 steelhead passage barriers on Halama Creek on the Dangerman Preserve. These barriers were 0.5 mile and 1.5 miles up from the estuary, respectively, and opened up 13 miles of spawning and rearing habitat. Now we are working on preliminary conceptual designs and up through 30% engineering designs for 4 passage barriers on Escondido Creek, which is a tributary to Halama Creek. This is critical habitat for steelhead as well as for red-legged frogs. So there'll be a multi-species benefits to these projects. One of the first barrier is immediately upstream from the confluence with Halama Creek and is a culvert underneath Halama Road. So anybody who drives out to Halama Beach to go surfing or get a Halama burger, you're crossing over one of those barriers. So we're excited to be kicking off this process, and we've invited a wide range of technical stakeholders to weigh in on our conceptual designs. We anticipate having 30% engineering designs by the end of the year.
Okay, thank you for getting that in there. And again, if you needed to say and do an announcement, I apologize. Email me beforehand, and then we'll make sure there's time for you. Most of the time, these meetings do not run so tight long, but I think we were having such a good conversation about steelhead in the beginning. Ran over time. Reminders, please send me your information. For everybody who wants announcements to go out to the wrap-up email for this. And also, if you have any news you want to be shared for the newsletter, don't forget to send that to me by the last week of February, which is in a couple of weeks. And then I will post the March newsletter for that news for March on the first Friday of every March. So thank you very much. Keep your emails open. Email me if you need anything. And if you want to be a speaker for next meeting, please contact me. Other than that, everyone have a wonderful lunch. Have a good time. I will see you all. Goodbye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.